Hello, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural episode of our podcast. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I'm Guif, aka Mehmet, depending on how you know me. I'm here with my podcast partner and very good friend, The Final Say.
Hello.
And today, in our inaugural episode, we're going to be talking about who was the best driver of the 2012 season, Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, or Sebastian Vettel. So the structure of today's episode is going to be I'm going to give my opening statement in favor of Lewis Hamilton, who I believe was the best driver that year. Then the final say is going to give his opening statement in favor of Fernando Alonso, which is almost the consensus of who was the best driver that season. And people widely believe Alonso had the one of the best seasons of all time. Then we're going to move on to the rebuttals. After that, we're going to move on to our closing statements, which will be in the same order as it was for the other ones, and then it will be up to you guys to decide. Who do you guys think was the best driver? Of course, none of us will be advocating for Vettel. However, we're going to be talking about him as he's a significant title protagonist, and he's the one who won the title. However, we're going to be mainly basing our arguments on who we think was the best driver. So the 2012 season. Now, on the surface, it may seem that Lewis Hamilton he wasn't a title protagonist. In the standings, he finished fourth, just a few points ahead of teammate Jenson Button. However, he was the undisputed most unlucky driver that season. The points he's lost to misfortune range from 100 to 150, depending on how people define misfortune and the different calculations that they take. But in terms of misfortune, there's nobody close to Hamilton in terms of the amount of points they've lost. If we do a calculation of misfortune for all the title protagonists, Hamilton, Vettel, and Alonso, Hamilton comes out on top as the champion if we remove all their misfortune. Now, of course, misfortune is a part of F1. We have to factor that in. We have to factor things such as Alonso being so consistent, relentless consistency that he capitalized on Vettel and Hamilton's shortcomings to take an inferior car, arguably definitely the third fastest car at its best, to the final race of the season and almost winning the title. However, this is not to say that Hamilton was not consistent in 2012 either. If we look at how consistently he beat Jenson Button, a champion in the same machinery, pretty much to the same extent at which Alonso beat Massa. And Alonso beating Massa by such a margin is mainly the reason why this is considered such a great season from Alonso himself. Of course, the main reason is to take such an inferior car to the final race of the season, to be so consistent. However, these are all things that can be applied to Lewis Hamilton. And for me, other than the fact that he didn't take it to the final season for reasons that were completely out of his control. Had they not happened, he drove like a champion the whole year. The gap he had to his teammate was akin to the gap that Alonso had to Massa. He had the most poles that season, should have had the most wins that season. The title fight should have been between Hamilton and Vettel. And it's a testament to how great Alonso is that Alonso was involved there. However, to no fault of Hamilton, he was outside of it. Now, my final point is going to be that the main reason Alonso was involved in the title fight was because of the misfortune of Vettel and Hamilton. Now, of course, I also completely agree that Alonso was a top two driver this season and that he was better than Vettel because Vettel's misfortune was not as significant as Hamilton's, and Alonso was way more consistent to take that car to the final race of the championship and almost beat Vettel. However, Hamilton would have finished a significant margin ahead of both of these drivers, of both Alonso and Vettel, had he not had these misfortunes. It was almost a flawless season, similar to Alonso. The margin in which he beat Button was almost as significant as Alonso beating Massa, if not as significant. And that's pretty much my opening statement. And if the final say can do as the opening statement.
Fantastic. Yeah, some good points raised there.
Yep.
And
Thank you.
so, of course, I have my own take on those things. So, as you mentioned,
Yep.
consistency. Alonso, in my opinion, is the only driver in the top three teams to remain consistent for the entire season. And sure, there was perhaps a little bit of luck playing on his side to get him into the podium, but the truth of the matter is that outside of the car's weakness, which was qualifying, he was always consistently top five, top even podium, with or without luck. Whereas Hamilton had quite a few tripped over a few times when he wasn't necessarily under pressure or even just out of not necessarily having the speed. Of course, he got unlucky himself more than Alonso did, but also Alonso proved that he didn't necessarily had to rely on luck on quite a few occasions. He just performed at the very top level where cars faster than him tripped up, and he was just completely perfect. And he would win a race, or even if he came second, he would still perform to the best ability that the car could achieve. Whereas Hamilton did on a few occasions underachieve. Also, not only that, I would suggest that Hamilton's mental game was perhaps not at its strongest during this season as it would be in later seasons in Mercedes against Rosberg, because in this season in McLaren, he quite famously leaked a lot of data. In Belgium, he leaked Button's qualifying data, or maybe his own data, but he leaked some qualifying data related to the car on Twitter, which was just a completely unnecessary and demoralising move for the team. Whereas Alonso, in his two championship fighting years for Ferrari, and especially 2012, did rally the team together very well. Even if he does get a bit of stick for being very difficult when the team is not doing so well, such as 2013-14. There we go. There's my statement.
Brilliant. I agree with a lot of what you said, and you've said some very good points also. Um, I guess now it's probably time to move on to the rebuttals. Yeah, if you want, I can do the first rebuttal.
Fantastic, yeah, for you.
Yep. So, I'll echo, you said a lot of valid points, certainly, especially on the mental game aspect, which I will concede that Alonso's mental game was certainly better than Hamilton's, especially that incident with the telemetry leak, sort of serving as a microcosm of Hamilton's mentality that season. However, I think that obviously mental game is, I'd say, quite a small percentage of. I mean, in a title race, it is more significant than in any other condition or situation. But in terms of the best driver, I feel as though the pace one has, things like racecraft, pure speed, and all of those things more related to like what happens on track rather than off track. Of course, mentality plays a part, and in terms of what happens on track, but I feel as though, especially before the misfortune really hit Hamilton, especially in the latter part of the season, for example, races like Singapore and Abu Dhabi, um, sort of wins that he was on track to winning, but were robbed of him out of his control. But if we look at the first half of the season in terms of consistency, especially in qualifying, Hamilton finishes either first or second in qualifying. I believe for every single one of the first, from the first race until the European Grand Prix, with the exception of the Monaco Grand Prix, where Mercedes were quite strong, and of course Michael Schumacher got a bit of a, you could say, phantom pole. Um, and of course, in the Spanish Grand Prix, he did get disqualified from qualifying. But uh, in terms of, if we look at, of course, average qualifying, median qualifying, Hamilton stands out from pretty much everyone else in this season, especially when we compare him to his teammate. Now, of course, if we compare Alonso to his teammate, Felipe Massa, he also has a gargantuan gap to him. But I feel as though the gap that Hamilton has to Jenson Button, a world champion, at this point we could of course accept that both Button and Massa were at similar level and past their best. Simply the fact that Button was a world champion and had a very strong 2011 season the year before, and Hamilton comes back in 2012, absolutely destroys him on pure pace. And without the misfortune, would have gotten pretty much double his points. Says so much about the pure pace and consistency that Lewis Hamilton had. And I mean, I could talk about in terms of Alonso having certain issues with his racecraft and not necessarily mentality, but on track incidents. For example, I believe it was in the Japanese Grand Prix where Alonso had a collision with Raikkonen. We could attribute that to Alonso, um, which is also similar to uh, what his incident with Grosjean, where when Grosjean crashed into Schumacher, Alonso, we could say, was the catalyst for that crash when he pushed Grosjean into Schumacher. Now, of course, we could, Hamilton did have incidents of his own on track, but in terms of Alonso being considered to have a virtually flawless season and Hamilton not, I feel as though it's not necessarily disingenuous, but it's sort of it's not entirely truthful. So that's pretty much my rebuttal and vindication of Hamilton. And if you want, you can go on to your rebuttal also.
Yeah, I would like to as well. In my opinion, I find it quite ironic actually in Japan that the two drivers I'd say had the best racecraft that year were that collided together in that lap one being Raikkonen and Alonso. But I mean, on the racecraft, I mean, Alonso did have two lap one incidents. One completely not his fault, obviously in Spa, and one in Japan, which where again you could attribute the blame to him. It's not like it was in the middle of the race where it was stupid to do, like in lap one cars are moving around all the time, and where it was probably his fault. It's not something that if both cars continued and were on track, like he would be penalised for. It's just a normal racing incident in my mind. However, Hamilton did get caught up. If you look at Maldonado in Europe, for example, he lacked perhaps a bit of foresight, and he also just did a quite a aggressive defending, which resulted in again in what is my opinion a racing incident, but one that Hamilton could have avoided himself. Maldonado technically was at fault for bottoming out on the curb, but he was only put in that position by Hamilton in the first place. Also, you have to acknowledge Hamilton's part to play in Belgium. Again, not his fault necessarily. He could have backed out earlier, though. He shouldn't have as a driver, but he could have backed out earlier, and that would have been no crash at all. But instead, he kept his foot in it. Again, arguably, a driver should do this. Otherwise, he would never be world champion. But again, he did get caught up in another incident there. Also, in terms of comparison to teammates, obviously Hamilton did demolish Button, but in my opinion, that importance of that is not as strong as perhaps you're suggesting. Button struggled a lot with tyre warm up and tyres in general. Something he admitted, the team admitted, and he said he's had problems with since his time at Brawn. And in my mind, perhaps Hamilton beating Button so convincingly on quite a few occasions in 2012 is similar to how Max beat Perez this year, 2024, and even 2023. Obviously, Button is a level higher than Perez, which is why Button won 3 races on merit. Or perhaps not Brazil on merit, but certainly won Belgium and Australia on merit, convincingly beat Hamilton in Australia. So that's not something Perez obviously did here. I would also like to say, in terms of Hamilton did have the incredible qualifying in general the whole year. He did miss out on the front row in China as well. He was 7th there for the start in China, so that was just a slight difference in the statistics that you're referencing. But I would also say, in terms of the race, which is where you get the points, Alonso took 13 podiums in 2012, the highest of any driver. Vettel took 10, and Hamilton took 7 podiums, which doesn't sound like a lot, and 5 of them were wins. So there's just, he took 8 podiums. 4 of them wins. It was 7 podiums. But when you compare that, and even if you write the mistakes that he made, not the mistakes, the failures, he gets podiums from obviously Brazil, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and that's it from straight up mechanical failures, that's only 3 more podiums. Still has less podiums than Alonso in a faster car. Okay, he had technical issues in Korea, which cost him the chance of fighting for a podium, and obviously he had his fuel issue in qualifying Spain, which cost him a likely podium there as well. But even then, if you are generous and give him specifically Korea as well, that's still only 12 podiums in a faster car compared to Alonso. Now, this doesn't say that Lewis wouldn't have deserved the championship had he won all those races and got just 12 podiums when Alonso got 13. But I think it just shows a lot that Alonso has been able to extract the maximum out of his car every single time, whereas particularly after the first half of the season, or even the first few races, Hamilton started to struggle with this, and he did have teething issues with the team and the pit stops, but I don't think he was consistent enough to warrant perhaps being the best. I mean, Alonso was able to, as I said, take 13 podiums, and sure, it was only 3 wins compared to Hamilton, and only 2 poles, both of which came in wet conditions compared to Hamilton. But supposedly, wet conditions, so this is the great equaliser. Hamilton didn't take either of those poles, so for me, that's why I would put Alonso ahead. And in terms of percentage, Hamilton's podium percentage was 35%, Alonso's was 65%, and had a podium streak 2 longer than Lewis Hamilton. Also, I notice you're muted, so no rush.
Oh yes. Oh, my apologies.
Don't need
No, no,
we can cut this bit out, so it's fine. Don't worry.
Oh, do you wanna? Oh, yeah.
I do actually have one more thing I've got to throw in. So
Yeah,
I'll
go
keep
for it.
speaking.
Yeah,
I'll just
yeah.
cut it back in.
Yep.
Alonso's average qualifying position was only 6.45 compared to Hamilton, who was 3.2, I think it is, or 3.1, 3.16. Now, obviously, that is a big gap, but you have to recognise the fact that Ferrari early recognised that their car was much stronger in the race than it was in qualifying, and even from when the car was weak at the start, it was still strong in the race. I think that's perhaps an issue that is slightly exaggerated by some Alonso fans, including me in the past. But you have to recognise the fact that you still don't get points for qualifying, so that was just a strategic decision made by Alonso and Ferrari to focus their race setups and everything on keeping the tyres good and having a fast car on Sunday, and relying sometimes on Alonso's good starts to make positions quite quickly and early on in the race, such as his famous start in Europe, going from P11 to P8 right at the start, I think it was. No, yeah, you're now done.
Indeed. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, again, raised a lot of valid points, a lot of which I agree with. Um, in terms of the podium, oh, actually, yeah, I think I'll do the getting a bit ahead of myself. I'll do the closing statement now, and then of course we'll conclude with the final say, doing the second conclusion. So, in terms of my conclusion, what I would say is that as a summary and in terms of a final small counter to some of your points, I think I'll do a few little counters. But in terms of the podium thing, of course, again, I'm going to reinforce what I said before in terms of a lot of these results and the final standings, and essentially the tail of the tape of how the championship unfolded is because of the misfortune that Hamilton had, and Alonso being the beneficiary, of course, of a lot of drivers, particularly the title protagonist, misfortune. But that obviously has aided his the podiums that he racked up. Obviously, the win in the European Grand Prix was a great win. Also benefited from Vettel having misfortune. Also, the podium percentage would have been lower, and Hamilton's would have been significantly higher. And you, of course, um, I mentioned that Hamilton would have had 12 or 13 around that podiums had he not had misfortune. So if we counter in misfortune, Hamilton would have had more podiums than Alonso, I believe. Um, But if we go back on the issue of teammate comparison, of course, Button did have a lot of issues with the car. But in terms of, we could, in terms of a world champion, uh, we could make excuses for, any driver, but especially for a world champion. Now, however legitimate these issues are, Hamilton has shown exceptional adaptability throughout his career, and of course, so has Fernando Alonso. But I feel as though in this case, when it's a world champion, he's got struggles with the car, just like Button has. It sort of takes away from the fact that on the surface and in terms of if we look into the whole season as a general, how impressive the gap that Hamilton has on Button. So we could make the similar excuses for Massa being past his best, post surgery, these kinds of things, in terms of his gap to Alonso. I feel as though both are incredibly impressive gaps to their teammates, but Hamilton's certainly even the most significant, considering Button would have finished fifth in the championship and Hamilton should have won the championship if things didn't go against him throughout the season. Uh, Insane qualifying consistency, especially when the car is up there. In the races, also, pretty much most of the points that he lost was because of misfortune. And really, this would have been seen as arguably Hamilton's greatest title win. He would have probably been seen as the best driver that year. Alonso had incredible consistency, but so did Hamilton. Alonso's consistency, I believe, is quite overrated by the fact that he had a far more reliable car and unreliable title rivals around him that had a very fast car, but of course, um, it broke down. Or certain other types of misfortune, whether mechanical or on-track incidents, and you could attribute that to Alonso being having incredible awareness and racecraft. However, we should mainly attribute it to the fact that he had a far more reliable car than his title protagonist rivals. And Hamilton had the complete opposite. He had a fast car. We can't say definitively better than the Red Bull. I mean, there could be a case for it. Um, However, this should have been between Hamilton and Vettel. Of course, Alonso was better than Vettel. However, he was simply in the conversation of winning the title or in contention to win it because he benefited from Hamilton and Vettel's misfortunes. But yeah, that's pretty much my final point. Um, and if the final say could do his conclusion statement as well.
I mean, in terms of my closing statement, I'll say both, as you said, both drivers had big gaps to their teammates, of which I don't think particular teammate performed well, so that would have been expected of a driver of their caliber. I mean, in terms of why I think Alonso is the best is if you go race by race and say what could he have done differently, or what race result could he have gotten better. You just can't do that on pretty much any race bar Japan, as we've discussed earlier. I mean, even if we adjust all these podiums that we were talking about between Lewis and Alonso, Lewis would get 3 for his DNFs, and he would take away 2 of Alonso's. That leaves Alonso on 11 podiums and Hamilton on 10. So Alonso would still beat Hamilton on podiums, even if he loses the title. Alonso could have finished third this year behind Hamilton as well, and I'd still think he would have been the best driver. Okay, he did get lucky, but he was the only driver in the top team to almost, like, he put a foot wrong only on one occasion, and that was a tiny racing incident that resulted in his DNF in Japan. I mean, his results from pretty much Spain onwards speak for themselves. Spain, second. Okay, would have been third maybe if Hamilton had won, but still podium there, podium in Monaco. Canada fifth on the wrong strategy. He one-stopped, the two-stop was faster. Europe, he won. Okay, Vettel had his instance, that's still minimum second. Britain, as from 11th, where was Hamilton? He was running second, was too slow to beat a Lotus, and then crashed over Williams. He was behind Alonso when that happened as well. And then Britain, he got another podium, Alonso. Germany, he won. Again, Hamilton the king of qualifying this year, didn't manage to put it on pole in either wet race. Hungary, okay, only fifth, but then Belgium taken out of a probable podium, and then podiums again till the end of the season minus Japan. Okay, two of those would go if we reinstate Hamilton from his DNFs, but no other driver put a car where it should be every single time to benefit from these mistakes. No other driver did that this season to the same level that Alonso did. I mean, you could argue in the two highest consistency drivers on the grid would have been Alonso and Kimi. Both scored points on every race they finished, whereas Hamilton was, and Kimi won every race, and Hamilton was sometimes way down the grid where he shouldn't have been in that car. And yeah, that's my conclusion.
Brilliant. Once again, so many very good points, and ultimately it will be down to everyone watching who do you think it was the best, and whether actually Sebastian, if we had a third person defending Sebastian Vettel, I think it would have spiced up the debate more. But of course, in the future, if the viewers are very interested and obviously gives their ideas, we could have some guest speakers also. But I think as an inaugural episode, I'd like to thank the Final Say for his incredible points, amazing debating, adeptness and pedigree, and as a co-host, but also to the viewers for watching this. We truly appreciate it. And yeah, definitely. If the Final Say, would you have any comments as well?
It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoy and keep watching any future stuff that comes out, and yeah, go argue with him on Twitter.
Great. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I look forward to. I think it's been a great first episode, and again, would like to thank everyone involved, especially the viewers for watching and listening, whatever means you are using to experience this first podcast. We truly appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone, and take care.
Goodbye.